Fear can be insidious and hold us back, and you may not see it lurking there. Hello, fellow souls. With my videos, my intention is to be as realistic as possible, meaning not only are they based on my experience and what I've learned over the years, but I want to come from a no BS perspective. There's no magic wand or pill or person that can instantly morph you through your purification process or a dark night. Each of us are on our own unique path tailored to us, what we need to heal, what we need to learn, and how in tune we are with our own inner world. Fear and dread can be a big part of our process. When we're in the apex of a dark night, for instance, we can experience existential fear and dread. Dread and fear that is embedded deep within our psyche and subconscious. In this case, we need to face this darkness in order to allow the process to do its work. Here are some definitions I've added as a reference. Existential fear. Anxiety related to themes that involve questions about death, freedom, meaninglessness, and isolation. An existential dread is a profound, deep-seated psychic or spiritual condition of insecurity and despair. The fear I'm talking about in this video is a fear that can be experienced by anyone at any time. Fear can be insidious and can hold us back in ways we don't recognize. Is the fear real or imagined? Unless you're in some physical danger, it's most likely imagined. One of the biggest fears is fear of the unknown. When we don't know what's going to happen, we start filling in the blanks. And if it's something that we're concerned about, we start imagining the worst case scenario, which in turn surrounds us with negativity. Our thoughts and feelings are powerful, so it's important to not envelop the situation and the field around it with negative emotions. Negative emotions like hate and doom and gloom. When we don't know what an outcome will be, we need to be open and try to maintain an equilibrium. Fear typically ignites toxic emotions. We go into fear and start to spiral. Worry, hate, jealousy, hopelessness, you name it, all the lower chakra emotions. And this is when we still don't even know what will happen. Believe me, I've been there. Learning to master or get a hold of our fear can take time. It can be a process with many layers. Fear takes over in many ways. One of the ways is the fear of being our true self. We're so conditioned from an early age on who and what we're supposed to be. Maybe you know from an early age, but many of us don't, so we toe the line. The definition of toe the line is to conform to a rule or standard, basically what society imposes on us. And it's not only about who you want to be or what you want to do in this life, it's about recognizing our non-physical inner world, knowing that there is something within all of us that's connected to source, connected to a universal flow that we can work along with rather than working against it. For some, this might be easy, but for some of us, it can take time to undo and work through what's been layered onto us. For too long, we've worried about what other people will think, or we believe that others know better than us, so we give up on our ideas and beliefs. We have a gut instinct, and so many times we don't follow it. Life in the matrix is easy for some, and not so easy for others. I have friends that I often think are good at the matrix. This isn't a judgment either way, it just is. If they're content within it, then so be it. We don't know another person's path in this life. We don't know their karma or their blueprint. Then there are those of us who don't fit into the matrix so well. My guess is that we're meant for a different experience. Maybe we've been on the karmic wheel for so long, for eons, that we decide to wrap it all up, which is a good thing, but can create a challenging life experience. We'll say to follow your heart, or to come from the heart, which of course is better to come from the heart than from hate, but sometimes our heart is broken. Sometimes our heart is suffering. So when we're listening to our own inner guidance, it's not necessarily the heart, it's source. Source is the magic bullet that's within all of us. We need to be careful to not come from our emotions. Source is non-emotional, and in my experience, does not blow smoke, if you know what I mean. Source is also not ego. It does take some practice getting to the one source. Early on, I would argue with it, or not believe it, because it wasn't what I wanted to hear, which was a bad choice on my part. We fear being alone, so we might settle for something not for our greatest good. There still exists somewhat of a stigma towards being alone, but it's changing. Sometimes on this path, circumstances will lead us to being alone even when we think we don't want to be. This is when trusting the process becomes crucial, but not easy. When it comes to anything you think you don't want in your life, like being alone, here's my take on it. It's kind of like the old saying that the grass is greener on the other side, but with a twist. There are positives and negatives to every situation. So you have to make the best of whatever situation you find yourself in. Don't be afraid to be alone. You'll discover a lot about yourself, and when and if you do find a partner, you'll be able to bring a lot more to the table. We know we're never truly alone as we're connected and one with Source. But believe me, I know it can't quite fill the physical enjoyment of relationships. Fear can be isolating. This is different than being alone. You can even be with others and still feel isolated. You may even forcefully isolate yourself. You might fear rejection and judgment. Or you may not like being around other people. This is a phase of the process that most of us go through, but again, I'm talking in generalities. I'm also not talking about people that prefer to be alone because it suits them. I'm talking about your fears causing you to isolate yourself. The fear of what could or might happen. Isolating yourself because you believe what the ego mind is telling you. I'm throwing in a little caveat to this one. Obviously, if you have a great spidey sense, a strong intuition that tells you to avoid a certain situation, then I would listen to this. Just make sure it's intuition and not fear. Fear is one of the things that Source really drove home to me through my process, and I know this is true for countless others. It said fear is of the mind. When we're constantly in fear, we're closing off the possibilities that are there waiting. Even if the worst thing you feared happens, it's generally the rule that things will work out in some shape or fashion. Of course, there's always the exceptions. Fear can control our life. It can stifle us at every turn. It can close off the universal flow. It can block the positive energies. And fear doesn't mean not taking action. There are big things in life that it's hard not to feel fear, which is really more of an anxiety. Things like illness, loss, or legal issues. When these things happen, we need to face them and take action, and it can be very hard not to feel fearful and anxious. And I'm talking more about the insidious fear that creeps into our everyday and keeps us from experiencing peace in our sovereign beingness, the fear that is holding you back. So what can we do? The first thing is awareness. If we're not aware that fear is getting in our way, it will be hard to overcome it. Byron Katie, a popular author and teacher, would ask the question, do you know this to be true? So when you're feeling fear over something, ask yourself if you know it to be true. Or is it an imagined story in your head, or worry over something that hasn't even happened yet? Our ego can make us impulsive, can make us overreact, can put us into fear. I have practiced this myself, that if you approach things in a calm manner, in a patient manner, and an open manner, you might be amazed at the outcome, although it might not be exactly what you wanted or expected. I'm no Pollyanna, but I've been around long enough and in this process long enough to know that not going into fear, staying present, and allowing the possibilities to unfold will assure the best outcome possible. It's almost like dictating for things to go well. I believe that all will be well and that a favorable outcome exists. Getting out of fear is a training of the mind. It's taking a pause, checking in with Source, and proceeding with calm assurance. It's not leaping to conclusions. It's not thinking the worst. It's a turning it over, so to speak, knowing that there are things we can't control. We act when action is needed. We deal with things as they become necessary. Sometimes we act too prematurely out of fear and realize later that it would have been better had we waited and given things time to unfold. And sometimes we ignore things out of fear. We procrastinate and pretend it's not there. This is another sign of fear. One of the big things we tend to ignore is our health. We wait for something to go away or tell ourselves it's nothing, only to end up in a possible dire situation. It's finding that sweet spot right in the middle, that balance and equilibrium where we don't ignore and procrastinate and we don't overreact and jump the gun. Sit quietly, breathe, check in with your inner guidance, give it room to unfold, or act when appropriate. Believe that you deserve the best possible outcome.